1998 Republican primary election. It was September of '98. It was my second year at Western Maryland College up in Westminster, and I got out of class on a Tuesday, the second Tuesday of the month, and I drove home to Anne Arundel County, and I made sure that I cast my vote for governor, for county executive, and various other races that year. It was the first time that I got to be a participant in the electoral process. It was the first time I got to make my voice heard as a Republican here in Maryland, and that I really got the opportunity to be a part. I feel like I was being a significant part of the political process here in Maryland, and a significant part of the Republican Party as well. And that's not really a feeling that everybody gets to feel, and that lack of feeling extends to Brian Murphy, the Republican candidate, the other Republican candidate, I should say, for governor. In 2005, Brian Murphy, at the age of 28, finally registered to vote here in Maryland, and he registered as a Republican. He didn't vote in the 2006 primary election. He decided it was not important enough for him to participate in the 2006 primary election, nor did he participate in the 2008 primary election as well. Brian Murphy had two distinct opportunities to participate in the political process as a Republican, to select his party's candidates, to select his party's leadership. He didn't do it. Brian Murphy was absent without leave when it came to standing up and making his voice heard within the Republican Party. That kind of leads you to wonder about Brian Murphy and what motivations he has now in running for governor of Maryland, when given two opportunities to do the most simplest way to participate in the political process, by going to the polls and voting, and by voting in your party's primary election. Brian Murphy couldn't have bothered to get off his duff and do it. So why now, all these years later, has Brian Murphy decided that he wants to run for governor of Maryland? What qualification does he have? What voice as a Republican does he have to feel like he is qualified to be the Republican voice for the state of Maryland? You know, Brian Murphy and certain numbers of his supporters are going around trying to define who is and who is not a real Republican. Well, I don't think anybody has any right to tell somebody else that they are or they aren't a real Republican when you couldn't be bothered to get off your ass and go vote in a primary election. That's just incomprehensible to me as somebody who has voted in every election in which he's ever had the ability to vote, has participated in the Republican political process at all levels. I mean, Brian Murphy is a political neophyte. It's not just that he has not a career politician. It's the fact that he couldn't be bothered to be a participant in the Republican Party until he decided that he and he alone was most qualified to be the Republican standard bearer for governor in 2010. I mean, Brian Murphy couldn't have even been bothered to join his local Young Republicans chapter in Montgomery County. But instead, he feels like he is qualified enough and is necessary enough and is Republican enough to run for governor of Maryland. Now, I don't dispute the fact that anybody who is of age and meets the minimum qualifications can run for governor. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you should. The more you learn about Brian Murphy, the more you realize that the Brian Murphy that he and his supporters want you to believe exists isn't really necessarily there. This is not a concerned Republican who has come along at this stage in life and realizes that they need a conservative alternative to Bob Ehrlich. This is a guy who saw an opportunity in an area in which he has not participated before, and through discussions with individuals who had a falling out with certain elements of the Republican Party, decided that he was going to fall in the grenade and run a kamikaze mission for governor. It certainly doesn't help the Republican Party. It certainly doesn't help himself, a guy who's created 18 jobs and has already threatened to move to Virginia if he doesn't win this primary election. The fact of the matter is this. I used to like Brian Murphy, but the more and more I learn about Brian Murphy, the more I realize that he's really not qualified to even speak about the Republican Party, much less be qualified to serve as governor of Maryland. The fact of the matter is, Brian Murphy, you don't get to tell me or anybody else who a real Republican is.